Okay, hello everyone. Today is October 3rd, 2018, and this is the Atlanta FileMaker Developers Group. Let's go around the room here and we'll do our introductions. I'll start here.
Hi, I'm Sean from 360 Works.
Hello, I'm Joshua from 360 Works.
Junior, 360 Works.
We've got a small crowd here today, but very smart people. The best ones showed up. So, my name is David Nadel from Blue Feather. Our presenter today is Salvatore Colangelo, and I'm going to pass it to him now to begin his presentation.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm not gonna put my live face on it. I'm just gonna show you a few slides. So I was really happy to be asked to present. I'm just trying to present a similar thing to what we talked about at DevCon this year, but in a pretty different way. It's not going to be something that I'm going to deliver. I just want it to be a bit interactive. But before starting with the interactive part, I just wanted to prepare a bit of a setting of what's going to happen. So if you never met me, that is my face. It's not the most important part of the morning. Sorry, for you, it's the evening. Why are we going to talk about these things? Like why we're going to talk about web services today, and why you keep hearing over and over about web services. Most of the people in attendance there are from 360 Works. Jesse has been talking about web services for 10 years, maybe more. Nick at Goya has been talking about that for 10 years or more. Win the Court has been talking about that. So why something that smart people have been talking about for a long time is now becoming that important in the FileMaker ecosystem? Well, one of the main reasons is that now it's a lot easier to do it. Since FileMaker introduced insert from URL with the curl options in version 16, that opened the door of web services to FileMaker developers that didn't really need to delve too much into other technologies or how I do these things. Now it's kind of packaged in FileMaker. So the idea of curl and curl options in FileMaker, it just means that insert from URL, instead of using some proprietary protocol like that HTTP post that was invented just to get around a few issues. Now FileMaker has exposed this curl library that lets us do calls on the web, just specified by URL. That we can talk to resources on the web, just specifying the URL that we want to talk to. So curl is a pretty big library. I'm gonna skip some of this thing. It is just the slides from that time. So these are all the options that exist in curl currently. Okay, so it's a lot. There are more than 200 options, and they span across a lot of different protocols. But in FileMaker for now, and I had a couple of very interesting conversations about this at DevCon, they have been limited to HTTPS and FTPS. So only two protocols are covered in FileMaker for now. And the option offered in FileMaker only let us work on those two protocols. One big difference, if anyone has had experience with curl before, is that in curl we can work with files on the file system, but because we are going through FileMaker, FileMaker doesn't want us to access file directly, so we will use variables instead. That's the way that FileMaker let us interact with the file system. Just a quick look at some of the options that we normally use, and then we'll see. I'm talking about these options a lot. I'll skip into FileMaker in 1 second, and we'll see what these are. The main one that I always use are -- header, or the short version is -h. This is what I was saying before. It's the door that opened us the word of web services naturally from FileMaker. The specifying headers means that we can tell the web service all the context, all the authentication that they need to know to let us use the services. And this was not possible until, well, it was possible using plugins or using microservices, but it was not possible just from insert from URL before FileMaker 16. Minus data is pretty self-explanatory. It just means that we can add a body or payload to the request if we want to send data. And -x, so curl, the library curl is pretty smart about guessing what protocol. An HTTP protocol just means the action that we want to do. So do we want to create new things on the web service? Do we want to retrieve? Do we want to get? Do we want to modify? So curl is normally pretty smart about guessing what we want to do based on the how we put together the request. But quite a few web services don't use the protocols in the way that they're supposed to be used. And so sometimes we want to override that request with this -x. I forgot to say, if there is anyone around that has a question, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I don't mind you holding back until the end. There's no setup plan here. Yep. Okay. Sorry, I heard something there. So these options, these additional 3 options, are 3 options that I use to test a lot. A lot of integrating with web services, and if you ever put your head into web services documentation, you will see that it's probably being written by developers. It's very hard to understand. So a bit of web services integration is trial and error. And a good way to speed up that process is to use these 3 options. The trace trace down just everything that was involved in that request, including the data, can be set to a variable so that we can look at what happened, if there was an issue, if the request was refused. The thing that I said, that the data is involved in the request, is important to keep in mind, because if, for instance, you do a request passing a file, so a base64 encoding of a file, the trace will be big. So if you store the trace of your request over and over again, your file might grow up pretty quickly. So yeah, it's useful in debugging. I wouldn't store the trace over the long term. Dump header and head. Let us have a look at the headers of the response. So once we do a request to a web service, it sends back the payload if there is any data to send back, and then sends headers that, like the headers that we send them, create a context for that response. So the -dump header just let us put the whole header into a variable. And in a similar way, if we do a request with -head, that request is not going to send us back any type of data, even if there was data. Is just going to send us the header. And normally, just to test, we want to know that a header is number 200 to know that our request is successful, or we want to prepare our error catching based on the headers that send back.
Hey, Salvatore.
Yep.
Here, I don't know if you have it from there. It says, could you get into more detail about the file system sandboxing? The scope of the ability is the file system by variables.
Yes. So as I said before, curl normally let us pick stuff and write stuff straight into the file system. But because of the way that FileMaker manages the file system, we don't have direct access to the file system in FileMaker. We don't have any functions to do that. We have imported export functions, but unless we use a plugin in FileMaker, we can't really write directly to a file or to the file system, that same logic has been applied to the curl library. So instead of what the curl library does normally, so I can pick a file from the file system and say I want to send this file to the web service. In FileMaker, we'll have to have that file into a variable or into a container, and that file then can be added. And the other way around, if we retrieve a file and we want to write it to the file system, we'll have to store it into a variable and then export that variable to a file on the file system.
So you're saying that curl in FileMaker is a little more limited than using curl on the command line as far as accessing files go.
Yeah, it's just it is more limited, but it's just the way that FileMaker has always been treating the file system. FileMaker creates this, as you said, sandboxing layer on top of the file system. So yeah, that is definitely, every time that you look at the documentation for curl for a web service, a lot of web services give you the example in curl. You have to keep in mind that you might not be able to just copy and paste the example straight away into FileMaker, because you will have to have that extra step. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Right. So I hope that the boring part is over. So we're gonna have a quick look at one demo. So the idea of the demo is this: it's a real client of ours, even if the file is not there. So it's just a test file. So what they do is that they print promotional material, hats, T-shirts, that kind of stuff. And so what they want to do is that they receive inquiries from online forums. So people go online and type a request like, hi, I'm the Atlanta FileMaker group, and I would like to print something. And then they put together a bit of an artwork and they send it to the client to sign off. And the client says, yeah, I like that, let's do it. So they send those graphics to the printing team that actually does the printing. And the main thing that they wanted to do is that they wanted to use DocuSign for this second part, for the send clients the artwork. So DocuSign is a service for digital signatures. They wanted the client to have this binding signature on their artwork, so that it's like a contract. And so we can achieve all of this through web services. So let's go to FileMaker and have a look at how we did things. All right. So the first thing that they want to do was to retrieve a request from JotForm, which is just an online service for forms. I'll show you. I'll just bring it over. So I created a little form here. It's a request for quads. I want to. I should have picked a shorter name. It was a lot less typing. Okay. Right, so that is just my request. I can add a logo. I might have picked this one from someone's website. Submit a form and say thank you. Okay, all this, it's not at all in FileMaker. Okay, it's a separate service. It's just a website called JotForm. Okay, in FileMaker here, I have a button that says Get Forms. There are other submissions there that I've created during DevCon. So let's ignore that one for a second. this one is the one that I've just created. You can say it just came down. That is the file. That is the text that I typed in, and those are all the information that I typed in my form. Okay, so how did I do this? How did I pull down the information from job form to FileMaker? Okay, so how hard is to read the screen? Very?
We can. It's a little small. Yeah, it's okay. I think we're okay.
What about now?
I don't think the zoom shows through here, so I think it's all right though. You can go ahead. We can read it. We can make it out.
Yeah, okay. Because that was one of the big grief at DECON, that people couldn't see the scripting. So I'll try my best. All right, so this is a script that does that puts down the information, and the details of the script, are important because we'll see that it talks to .form. But more than anything, what I wanted to focus on is the series of actions that we do, because what I've been stressing since I've been talking about these things is that series of action can be applied over and over and over again to different web services. Doesn't really matter what the web service does. We can apply the same sequence of actions to get a response from that web service. So for every web service, the first thing that we need to do is some kind of authentication. There are web services that work without authentication, but yeah, there's not many, and there's probably not the most useful ones. So we need to be able to tell the web services who we are, and so the web service can know what kind of resources we have access to. In the case of JotForm, it just uses a little API key that I've just hidden behind custom function there, just so it doesn't appear on screen. But yeah, it's just a big string of text. Then every web service has some kind of specific parameters. In this case, that is just the ID of that form, of the form that just filled in. It's just an internal ID that JotForm gave me. And we need to know the URL. So this is the address where we want to send our request. So this is normally comes from the documentation. So, if you can read here, it says submission at the end. That is the endpoint. That means that I want to retrieve the submissions for that specific form ID from JotForm. If we are trying to send something to the web service, normally we have a body, but in this case, we just want to retrieve data, so my body is empty. And normally, I wouldn't put it there, but it's just to show, as I said, those steps apply to everything. And then we can put everything together in the options. So these are the magical curl options. I have a header called API key, which again is defined in the documentation. That just wants the API key for JotForm. And that's it. Because I have no data here and the form ID is already part of URL, there's not much else that I need to send there. And I'm just setting those two debug variables, as we said before. So I dump my headers in the variable called header, and I dump my trace into a variable called trace. So just I can have a look if anything goes wrong. All this doesn't do anything until step 21, which is the actual insert from URL. So insert from URL just says, I want to dump the response of this process into a field called response, into the table forms, or into the table current forms. I'm using those options, and I'm calling that URL. All right, and then I just have a little bit of post-processing, because so the result is in JSON, and so we need to, if it's successful, say this is what I was saying before. If the header has a code of 200. That means success. I need to parse that JSON to pull out all my, all the information that I needed. So I have the first name, the last name, email, the inquiry, the phone number, and the date. One special treatment is for the file, because .form doesn't send back the file, it sends back the file URL. Okay, so I need to do one extra step. I extract the URL from the JSON, and then I need to do another insert from URL into a container from that URL, just to grab the file that was the Blue Feathers logo, this one. Right. So again, the details are just specific to this web service, but the steps are exactly the same, and we'll see them right away in another web service. So authentication, web service specific parameters, URL, body, options, and then we call it. Right. So once they've received an inquiry, they put together a little project for the clients. All right, so let's fake a project. You can still see my screen properly.
Yep, this looks good.
All right, so it's our project is the Atlanta FM Group company. In it, content. I'm gonna put my email, so just I can open the document on my screen. But I could put David's email, and he will receive it. Oh, sorry, that is the wrong field. Okay, so as we said, this is a gadget company. So let's say that we want to do duckies and hats. I don't know how they apply to your group, but
We
okay.
use a lot of those. So.
All right, so let's add the same logo. All right, and it's gonna it just gives me a little preview. Okay, with your logos, you can add some custom thing. This is all just FileMaker stuff. There's nothing in there. It has created a little PDF. I can show you what the PDF is, just so we have an idea. Just open on my other screen. Okay, so it's just a little PDF with some of the information that we entered in there.
So did you do merging in FileMaker then?
Sorry?
Did you do the image placement in FileMaker, or was that going out and coming back from somewhere else?
No, it's all FileMaker. It's just web viewers is HTML5.
Oh, I see.
Layers of HTML5 overlapping. It was done mostly for presentation at DevCon. It can be, I'm sure that a good web developer could make that something that you can work over and over and over commercially. This has some shortcuts to to have the images positioning well, looking well. Because I'm not that smart as a web developer. But yeah, it's just HTML5 into a web viewer.
Okay.
So until now, we haven't used anything outside of FileMaker until this step. And so this send envelope button is gonna call the the DocuSign web service, and is gonna transfer that file. If you can see a very ugly screen right now, that is because in order to use the DocuSign API, we have to use an authentication that is a lot more complex than the simple API key that we had in form. And to put together that API key, I'll open my email while I'm talking so that we can see the DocuSign email coming through. To use the DocuSign web service, we need to put together that signature. At DevCon, I spent a bit of time explaining how that signature is put together. I'm happy if you want to go to that ugly web and to that ugly layout and have a look together. But it might be a bit hard for a 7:30 p.m. meeting. So up to you. anyway, DocuSign sends me an email saying that he has received the document again. Now this part is completely outside of FileMaker. Okay, we just handed over to DocuSign our document. So what DocuSign does, if you've never used the service before, gives us our document and has some positions where we can sign. Okay, so I can adopt that signature and sign here and sign here, and I'm happy for the company to go forward with my order. I did finish, and of course I haven't built in that part, but you could also retrieve the signed document back into FileMaker. Okay? In this specific example, I'm playing the double role of the requester and the approver. So I'm going to receive another email saying that my request has been approved to the same email address. Normally, these two emails go to two different people. Yeah. So my document has been completed. The document has been signed. Okay. So how did that work? Well, look at this script. It looks pretty similar to the previous one, right? So that's my whole point. We have authentication logic. Okay, so it's a lot harder than the API key that we had before. So instead of being just a little set variable, is a script that does the whole authentication logic, but still, that is the first thing that we need to prepare. I have service-specific parameters. In this case, is just the DocuSign ID of that demo account, which again ends up into the URL. And so if you look at the URL, this is the envelopes endpoint. So every time we send something, DocuSign calls that envelope. We're just packaging that into an envelope for that account and using the REST API from DocuSign. This time though, I'm sending something, so I need to create a body. And let's have a look at how the body is put together. So it's just a JSON document, and just have some keys that are defining the documentation. I want the document already sent as sent. I have a subject for the email. This is my document. So as you can see here, I can't point to the PDF anywhere. So the PDF is inside a container, and I'm base64 encoding the PDF and putting it into a key so it becomes a big string of text, and that's how we can put it in JSON. And then I just need to, this is just the way that the DocuSign JSON document adds those two signature boxes, and it just puts one at this position and puts one at this other position. So those were the two signature boxes that were there. There's a lot more other stuff that can be done through this JSON. You can add checkboxes, you can add other stuff. It's all in the DocuSign documentation, but this is the whole logic. Like, it's just a JSON tree. So we put together the body. We put together our options.
All the options that you're sending in there, you're actually specifying where you want those signatures to appear from FileMaker.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And so again, because this is a demo, I knew exactly that I have two objects in there, because I knew I was going to choose only two products, and so I hard coded the positions. But you could just loop through and create this with a FileMaker loop, but you know how tall every line of your document is, and you just increment by 250 every time you do a new line. Does it make sense? Like, this is hard coded because I know that I had 2 lines in my document, but it could be 10, and it will apply the same way.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And so all that comes together in the options. So remember, I specified that I want it to be a post with my -x. DocuSign needs to be told that my data is coming as a JSON document. So that is the header that says the content type is JSON. Then all that authentication logic that is behind the script in the end just gives me a token, which again is just a big text string. So I need to tell DocuSign, listen, this is the token that authorizes me to use your service. What we have on different from the JOS form is that we need to send the body. And so this is the way that FileMaker let us access the variables from within these options. So, if you have a @ and then the name of the variable, the data knows that it's not gonna interpret this as just some text put in there, but it's gonna look at the variable instead. So I'm saying my data is inside the variable $body. And again, this stuff is just for the bug.
And so
And
the
again,
thing in FileMaker too that you've got in here, the variables are actually strings, right? It's not a variable.
So it's a JSON document, but using the new JSON function, JSON set element, this becomes just a big text string. Yes, correct.
And when you're using the variable in your when you're setting the curl options, and you use $body, that's the string $body. That's not a variable being concatenated into a string you're assembling, like the string $body. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look, if you run this through the data viewer, you run it step by step, and you look at dollar options, you will never see that one being replaced inside here. It's just that FileMaker at runtime in this line, it will know to go through that and look at that one. But yeah, that is never replaced as a literal string in there. And then again, this is the same logic. The code that comes back, the header that comes back is slightly different. It's 201, which is for created instead of success, because we are creating a document on the web service. So I know that if it came back as a 201, it was created successfully. And that's about it. So as if you can see, this is exactly the same steps, okay? But we do two very different things. Like in the other case, we're just pulling down data. In this one, we are doing a very complex authentication and packaging a file in there and sending somewhere. But the steps are the same, right? The last thing that they wanted to do was to send that logo to their production team to print the actual rubber duckies. And to do that, they just upload it to Dropbox. So I have a little folder here in Dropbox called Demo 2018 File Upload. It's empty right now. But if I press this upload button, there's an error. And you can believe me or not, that is on purpose. And so that is because the next thing that I want to talk about is the most common issues. I have some slides that I had prepared for that con. I'll just keep a few of these things. Right, so this is what happens normally. You read the documentation, you test the API with your example data, it works, and you feel great. You feel awesome. You're like, I mastered this thing. And then you just try a teeny tiny change. You use exactly the same test API with your super simple data. and you spend hours understanding what I did different. Okay, so what happened there? And there's a series of issues. I'm gonna come back to the slide so we can look at them together. But I added on purpose those issues here in the Dropbox example. The Dropbox example again uses the same steps. So I have an authentication logic, which is just a token. I have some web service specific parameters, and the file, the remote folder where I want to put stuff, and just the path that I put together between the remote folder and the local file name. I have the URL, and I have the body. In this case, it's called params just because there are a few parameters in there. So you can read this text. It says path, mode, auto rename, and mute. And so the first error that I added here on purpose is that auto rename and mute have values of true and false, but I put them as a JSON string. This JSON set element, I found that people pay a lot of attention to the first and second parameter because they're the key and the value, and the third parameter becomes like an afterthought. But actually, it's very important to define the right type for your parameter. So auto rename and mute are true and false, so they're Boolean. So they're supposed to be sent as a logical value, not as a text. So that was the first issue. So if instead of sending it that way, I send it this way, the web service is going to like this params a lot more. So there was
another weird thing I want to just mention on here too. Can you open the back up again?
Yep.
So the types that you're setting here, those are not strings in like those are not the literal string JSON Boolean, right? Those get a value.
So the structure of JSON set element, probably I can do it in a JSON set element. The first parameter is the overall JSON tree where I'm adding something. Then is the key. So in this case, it's auto rename.
Yep.
And then is the value. In this case, it's true. And this is the last operator in the FileMaker function JSON set element is the type. And yeah, as I said, most people feel like they could forget about the type. They just really need to tell you where and what. But actually, web services are pretty sensitive to the type. They want the right type. So these are just keywords that FileMaker has created to help us enter the right type. So in this case, I'm just telling FileMaker, I want you to add that to your JSON tree as a Boolean value. That specific word is not going to appear anywhere in the JSON. It's just going to say auto rename true. Yeah. So at DevCon, I will run, after doing this change, I will run the script again, and will give me another error, and I can save you the joke time there, because the other error that I've entered there was this. This is a bit tricky to wrap your head around, but we're all used to escape our quote signs in FileMaker. We've done that many times. The issue in this script is that instead of referencing a variable like I did in the body before, I'm trying to put that variable directly into the text string. So exactly the question you were asking before, I'm putting that variable as just concatenated into the string. if I do that, I cannot just escape once like I will normally do in FileMaker, because the first escape was for FileMaker. But because quote is also an important sign for the curl options, I need to escape it again. So it's escape. Okay, so it's if I don't do that, FileMaker recognizes this as a valid string of text, but the web service refuses this because it will open the quote here, it will close it, it will open again. Oops, sorry. It will open again there, and it will close it at the beginning of this parameter, breaking the string, because it will forget all the rest of this parents variable. So if now I stop mucking around with my script and I run it once it's fixed, gonna think it. Should have picked a smaller file. Okay, so check the remote folder. So that was the folder that we were looking at before. Just refresh the web page. And there's a subfolder that I've created. And inside that subfolder, there's your logo. Okay, so it's been sent to Dropbox. All right, so to have a quick look at those common issues. So this is the first one. Okay, so not enough escaping. So if you put a string of text directly into the options, you have to think about double escape. Okay, so the first one looks correct in FileMaker on the left-hand side, but then evaluates in the option as that, and you see you have two quotes that follow each other, one after the -d and one before the O, and that breaks everything. The second version works a lot better. Another issue is that FileMaker has been always good to us in terms of spaces, in calculation. Doesn't really care too much about them. Not everybody is as nice as FileMaker. So if you write the first one and you don't wrap it, you don't wrap the content type inside quotes, curl is going to think that your header stops after the colon sign. So one way would be just to put the A next to the colon, but I prefer just wrapping the content type or any other header in inside quote signs. The last issue is sometimes I have clients that try to do web services and they call me and say, if I try with one, it works, but when I loop to try and put together a bigger JSON, it breaks. And normally is just a bit frustrating little issue. It's just that if you have a comma for the last one of your items, you add a series of blocks and they need to be separated by comma because that's how JSON separates them. If you add a comma also after the last JSON, it might break. That is another issue. So those are three things that happen all the time. So I think it's a lot easier to keep them in mind before you start, more than spending 3 hours and then finding that you've been fighting with just one comma for 3 hours. That doesn't make for the greatest day. And I'm not making this up. I'm telling you by experience. I wanted to show you one thing that I didn't show at DevCon. So this is just a little project that I've been working on with a real client right now. So this client uses Slack. I don't know if you guys use Slack or if you're aware of what Slack is. So you have a lot of channels there where you can talk to people or talk about specific projects. So what they wanted to do was they had purchase orders in their FileMaker system, and they wanted to be able to send purchase orders straight to Slack, and people should be able to approve or deny a purchase order straight from Slack without coming back into FileMaker. Okay, and of course the power behind Slack is mostly that they're able to integrate with a lot of things. And so I just wanted to show you that, again, we can do something, again, very different. So I just put together a little script called send PO to Slack. And you see, I just run it. And something has appeared here in this channel saying, please review this PO. The PO number is 78910. I have a button to view the PO, or can approve and deny. If I say approve, I'm gonna think about it. And it's thinking about, okay, and it's been approved by me. Okay, all this is FileMaker and web services. Okay, again, it might be a bit too long to look at all this in there. I just wanted to show you that, okay, it's not as well documented because it was just a quick test file. But if you see, it's the same thing. Like there are a couple of web service specific parameters as a URL, as my body, and I just insert from URL and send that to the to my Slack channel. So again, to do something very different like this, still exactly the same process, right? That wraps more or less what I wanted to show you. If you have any question, if you're still all awake.
Yep. We're all here. Turn this back on camera on our side too. Well,
I might try
you can see a little better. Hold on, we'll turn the lights back on here.
out of my screen sharing if I can.
Yep, so you can see you now.
Oh, you can see me.
Yep.
Okay. Bad news for you.
So.
All right. Yeah.
Those are, anyone have any questions about some things here?
I have a question about the whole sweeping thing. Was that particular to Dropbox, or is it kind of hit or miss between different web services?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Sorry.
The double escaping issue.
Yeah.
You're addressing, is that particular to Dropbox, or is it?
No, absolutely not. It happens to a lot of web services, as long like it's not due to the receiving end, is due to how we put together the request of the options to curl. So it breaks even before getting there. So Steve Winter from Matatir did a presentation 2 years ago at DevCon and used exactly the same example for an error, but I don't think that it wasn't Dropbox, it wasn't something else. So yeah, it's not specific to a web service, it's more specific to curl.
Okay.
Anything else from you?
Oh, actually, okay, sorry. I was looking at the questions. Yeah, there was a question from Chris about the file system sandboxes and boxing. So, but you already relayed that one while I was presenting. So, I don't know if a lot of the questions that come up after this kind of presentation is about authentication. There's a lot of people that get stopped from using web services because of authentication. Like that is the first step, but normally is the hardest. Like if I showed you the DocuSign example in full, or another example using AWS, you will have 20 lines, 30 lines just for the authentication in the script, and then 3 lines to call the actual web service. But there is now enough resources in the FileMaker community or around the web to start doing that anyway. Like in that Jesse from 360 did a session this year about authenticating to AWS. In the court did a similar thing. Steve Winter did something about the kind of authentication that we use in DocuSign. So if anyone wants to try web services and they don't use just a basic API key, they use something more complex, there is definitely now a wealth of knowledge in the FileMaker community, and most of these people are very open to be contacted about how to do things. I think this is the best way to try and get your hands dirty with web services.
That's great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming and doing this presentation. That was fantastic. Everyone here really enjoyed it, I think. And we had some people watching online too.
That's okay. Next time I'll try to come physically. That'll be a lot better.
We'd be really happy to have you here.
That will be fun. Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Okay, so that was really great, and Salvatore's all finished there.
Cool.
And so we're ready to talk about what we're going to do for next time. We have actually a speaker lined up already. Let's see here. So next time we're going to have Mike Bierge presenting, and he's given us a couple topics to choose from. Unit testing and FileMaker, converting custom web publishing to the data API, so bringing old CWP sites up to date. Robust FileMaker architecture, how to utilize model view controller pattern in FileMaker. JSON deep dive, give it a rest, basic API consumption using FileMaker. That's kind of similar stuff that we did today, I think.
Yeah.
And building modules and doing modular FileMaker development.
What does that mean? What's modular FileMaker development?
So that's like building a feature that you can take and move either in different areas within your system or to other
Like
systems.
custom functions, kind of.
Yeah, so custom functions are pretty modular. You can just copy and paste them out. But sometimes you can make user interface features that you can just copy and paste between layouts and with a few minor script changes, get them integrated in other places.
Okay. I like updating the custom web publishing engine to the data API.
That sounds pretty good to me too.
Yeah.
We've had to do that for a number of clients, particularly with CWP, like the PHP API.
Mm-hmm.
It's only for 5.6, PHP 5.6.
Wow.
Now we're on PHP 7.2, and there's a whole bunch of problems trying to use that FileMaker PHP API with newer sites. So that one sounds pretty interesting to me as well. And yeah, okay. Well, I'll ask him about doing that next time. That sounds pretty good.
Okay. And where's he from? What was his name again? I'm sorry, Mike.
Mike Bierge,
Okay.
I think says it. From Mainspring.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So that will be our presenter for next month.
Right.
Cool.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
All right.
Thanks everyone online.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.